Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the New Standard, and you're checking out the weekly roundup for February 12th, 2024. And as always, want to welcome everybody to the show. You're listening to myself, Lance Williams, host of the New Standard. Big up to my co-host, Neil Coulong. Want to welcome everybody into the program. If you want to participate in the show, go to the New Standard on YouTube, do a search for Lance Williams or Neil Coulong, or you can do a search on however you find your podcast by doing the same. Now, what we talk about on a weekly roundup is we kind of round up the shorts that we do and add a little more color, a little more texture to those shorts in the weekly roundup. And so we're going to jump into a couple of those topics. Before we jump into that, unfortunately, um, the first topic is going to be about the violence at the parade for the Chiefs. And I want to dedicate this show to the memory of Lisa Lopez Galvan, DJ Lisa Lopez Galvan, who was killed in that senseless tragedy. Also, it's been reported that two juveniles have been charged in the crime. And it's just a bad reflection, I think, overall of where we are. If you cannot go to a celebration for your favorite team and gun violence not occur. Um, and it's just, I'm not going to get into the politics of gun control or any of that. Um, and I'm not necessarily against gun ownership. I think we're all for responsible gun ownership. And for whatever reason you believe, America's having an issue with that. And we have seen that you can get shot anywhere doing anything at any time in America, which is absolutely scary. So hopefully um, the city of Kansas City can move on. Hopefully her family can do her memory justice. Hopefully, her family can move on. I am sure that this is a terrible time. So, again, our thoughts and prayers and condolences go out to the family of Miss Lopez Galvan and to the Chiefs organization and to the city of Kansas City as a whole. This is just very unfortunate. We have to do better. We have to be better. Um, I want to transition, and again, you're listening to the New Standard, the weekly short roundup for 2012, 2024. I want to apologize because I did get something wrong. And I'm always a guy that if you get it wrong, I think you should admit that you got it wrong. Because look, we're all doing our best in this platform and in this space to try to report news, which I normally don't do. I report news from other places because I am not a news source, and no podcast really is a news source unless you're absolutely tied into the team, unless you know somebody on the team. It is very hard for podcasts to get breaking news. We are just going to report on what we hear. And I did a short about the Steelers doing Mike Sullivan dirty. And the premise of the short was he saved the season by resurrecting Kenny Pickett in the Cincinnati game and doing a fantastic job, him and Eddie Faulkner, with Mason Rudolph over the last three games to get the Steelers to 10-7. Fortunately, the season ended in a loss in Buffalo in the playoffs. But through his hard work and Eddie Faulkner, they were able to get the Steelers in a position to compete for a championship, which is all you want to do year in and year out. And so the premise of the short was he did all that work, yet he got canned. That he was not coming back as the quarterback coach because Tom Arth was named the quarterback coach. But in my error, it seems as if Mike Sullivan, and if you go to the Steelers website, unless they haven't updated it, Mike Sullivan is still the quarterback coach. So him and Arth are still the quarterback coach. And that makes some sense because what it tells me is that Kenny Pickett has a good relationship with Mike Sullivan. And instead of turning over Kenny Pickett to a brand new quarterback coach, maybe Mike Sullivan can help in that transition. So to me, if he stays, if indeed he stays, it's fine with me. I mean, more, there's a saying, too many chefs in the kitchen. And in this case, with the Steelers' offense, as bad and pedestrian as it is, they might need just a person to sprinkle the salt. I mean, they need something to get their offense kick started and to get the development of Kenny Pickett kick started. And if that means Mike Sullivan is retained on the staff in some form or fashion with some duties, that's great. They've got to get Kenny right. And if this is going to get Kenny right, I'm all for it. And you should be all for it as Steeler fans. But speaking of Kenny Pickett, we also did a short, and again, you're listening to the New Standard, the weekly short roundup for February 12th, 2024. Happy Valentine's to everybody out there. Again, if you want to participate in the show, like and subscribe. Go to YouTube, do a search for the New Standard. Steelers have hired Arthur Smith, Tom Arth, Mateo Kambui, retained Mike Sullivan. And we did a short basically saying, tick, tick, tick. Kenny Pickett is on the clock. Kenny Pickett is absolutely on the clock because this is where, and we also did a short about the state of the quarterback position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I was on Reddit this week and I was looking at the Steelers Reddit post or Reddit thread or whatever you call it. And a guy wrote on there, I think very astutely, is that where we are as fans of a franchise, or we are fans of a franchise where Steeler Nation, the fan base is arguing on who should be the starting quarterback, Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph. Now, I want to step back and just let you hear that. We're living in a full-time era. And the full-time era that we're living in is the Patrick Mahomes era. We're dealing with number 15. And you're also dealing with another slew of quarterbacks. So to argue whether Pickett or Mason Rudolph should start is ridiculous because I think we can all agree neither one of those players are top 15 quarterbacks. I think we would argue starting quarterbacks. I think we would argue that those guys are probably top 25 and below, which I would say is probably a tier 4 guy. And I can't remember the guy who did the article that does, I think it was Mike Sando who does his article where he puts out the quarterback tiers. And I think he had Kenny Pickett in a tier 4, tier 5. That's pretty much the lowest you can be as a starting quarterback. So the quarterback position for the Pittsburgh Steelers is at a point where the fan base is arguing whether god awful is better than shitty as fuck. I mean, that's kind of where it is. God awful is better than shitty as fuck. That's what Steeler Nation is arguing when it comes down to the quarterback position. So if maintaining Mike Sullivan raises the floor for Kenny Pickett, because I think we're still in a place where we don't know where his floor is, but we absolutely know he's not a high ceiling player due to his lack of physical traits and his inconsistency in the pocket. He is a system guy. He is a guy that needs a system to elevate him, which is fine. They all do to a certain point. Some just need systems to elevate them more than others. That's why the Steelers brought in Smith, Arth, and Kambui. The clock, he's on the clock. Kenny Pickett is absolutely on the clock. He has to get it right. Because I can see a scenario where if Kenny Pickett doesn't get it right, and again, there's more rumors that Tannehill might be coming in. If Kenny Pickett doesn't get it right, this is it. He's not getting a fifth-year option. And, there's a ton of talk about Justin Fields. And we'll save our comments. We did a little few comments on Wednesday's show earlier this week, the magic number, the show from Wednesday about Justin Fields becoming a Steelers quarterback. We'll talk about more of that if that actually comes to fruition. Again, listeners, you're checking out the New Standard, the weekly roundup for the week of February 12th, 2024. And so that's where the Steelers are with their quarterback position. We also had a short we talked about a franchise quarterback. What is a franchise quarterback? And so because the quarterback play late Ben Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph to Kenny Pickett has been so mixed that what Steeler Nation, in my opinion, perceives as a franchise quarterback has been distorted. A lot of times when us and the fan base have these arguments around the quarterback position, we talk about it in the context of a franchise quarterback. But I think that definition for a lot of us is morphing, shifting, and changing. Quite simply, in my opinion, and I ask you and I challenge you, if you're listening to the program, put some comments, um, like and subscribe to the show, add some comments. How do you define a franchise quarterback? I define a franchise quarterback as a guy that can get you to the playoffs consistently, which in turn is a guy that can win you playoff games, a guy that can win you a championship where he can be the driver of the car, not the passenger. He can create and do things above, with and above the scheme to elevate your entire franchise. Also, he is a guy that makes up for roster deficiencies on your team. And also, to make it very simply, he's a guy that you think in a clutch situation can go one-on-one with number 15 Patrick Mahomes. Point blank, period. If you don't have that, if you don't have the belief that you have that in your building, you don't have a franchise quarterback. And arguing between guys that aren't franchise quarterbacks, it's like the famous cliche when, you see two people arguing from a distance, you can't tell the fool. You can't tell who's who. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if the ultimate goal is to win a championship. If you don't have a guy that can go blow for blow with 15 up in Kansas City, you don't got a franchise quarterback, period. And that's not Mason Rudolph. That's not Ryan Tannehill. That's not Kenny Pickett. That's not Justin Fields. That's not Russell Wilson. That's not any other name that you can imagine that the Steelers would have an opportunity to get. So you might as well, in my opinion, that's why I'm not pro Kenny. I think Kenny's average, but that's why when you split the difference, Mason's a bridge to no return. At least if you invest this season into Kenny Pickett, you can figure out what it is, what you truly have, and whether you're going to move on or not. But with that, listeners, again, I want to send my thoughts and prayers and condolences to the family of Lisa Lopez Galvan. I want to send my thoughts and prayers to the Kansas City Chiefs organization, to the city of Kansas City. And, I hope we can mend and move forward and be more responsible. We've shown that we can't in regards to guns, but I'm just hoping we can get there. And with that, we are going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.